Respected ladies and gentlemen, and all participants of this first international conference on life, energy, syntropy, and resonance. I am Surendra Singh Pokharna from India. I am basically a PhD in physics, postdoctoral in biophysics, and have done a postgraduate diploma in operations research. I was a senior scientist at the Indian Space Research Organization, where I worked on applications of remote sensing in agriculture. Presently, I am working in an IT company. Being born in a Jain family, I have been brought up with good knowledge of Jainism, a religion from India which is well known for non-violence. Because of this, I have a lot of interest in working in multidisciplinary fields, and hence this presentation, which is strongly influenced by the education and experience in different fields. Let me start with the next slide. Now, this is summary of my whole presentation. Now, I summarize it. A majority of the current problems are due to increase in emphasis on scientific knowledge and decrease in emphasis on other types of knowledge. Methodology of science used to study physical systems needs changes when applied to biological and human systems. General system theory can provide better ways of looking at these systems. The concept of Jainism that knowledge is structured in the consciousness needs to be explored in a modern way. Scientific knowledge is only a subset of total concept of knowledge. Spiritual processes appears to increase orderliness and reduce entropy production in the biosphere. Darwin's principle of the survival of the fittest versus the principle of live and let live needs detailed exploration. Evolution of soul through 14 stages in Jainism may provide alternative to the Darwin's principle of evolution. Let me go to the next slide. Why this presentation? Major problems of the modern era. Population is increasing and resources are shrinking. Automation, computerization is increasing but jobs are decreasing. Environment is getting polluted and care for animals is decreasing. Competition is increasing but love and affection are decreasing. Risk and uncertainty in life are increasing. Development is interpreted in the economic sense only, but gap between rich and poor is increasing. The recession and unemployment are worst of the century. Sperm counts on the average in males have gone down by 50% in last 50 years. Females are developing male-like characteristics. Is it the right direction to move? Let me go to the next slide. Some examples of entropy production in the biosphere. Now, all these development concepts have basically resulted into a large increase in the entropy in the system at almost every level and at every stage. So, there is a need to understand this process. Now, the first one here is mixing of hydrocarbons like petrol and diesel, the vapor with air which were otherwise distinctly separate, spread of industrial chemicals and other pollutants in rivers and ponds, adulteration of food and medicines and many industrial products, decrease in orderliness in music and increase in noise, mixing of roles of men and women, spread of electromagnetic pollutions in atmosphere due to very large increase in use of mobiles, internet and other electric gadgets. Increase in corruption and black money due to which unaccounted money diverted from main economy to hidden accounts. Now several examples are given in this slide, but one can reduce them essentially to an increase in entropy, that is more and more information is required to understand these new developments and their consequences. Let me go over to the next slide. Why physical laws? Now, to study this thing, we have to go into the fundamentals of the physical laws which are being used in the name of development. Now, the first is conservation laws of mass, energy, linear momentum and angular momentum, which are defined for isolated closed systems. Variables which remain constant with time, linear spatial displacement and rotational motion for such closed isolated systems are defined as mass, energy, linear momentum and angular momentum. What I mean to say here is that the The basic laws of physics are defined for isolated closed systems. Now, these are the fundamental attributes of any scientific physical description of any phenomenon, including biology. And these laws are generalized and used to study the biological systems also. For example, this energy mass is defined as that property of a closed isolated system which remains constant with time. What about open systems constantly interacting with the environment? Because all biological systems are open systems constantly interacting with the environment. How can one apply the laws which were developed to study the isolated closed physical systems to study the biological systems? So, how the laws developed on the assumption of closed isolated physical systems in physics can be applied to study biological systems rigorously? Only their material aspect will be studied by such a method. So it will provide only an approximate knowledge of the biological system. Let me go over to next slide for more details. Limitation of science as applied to biological human systems. Biological systems are essentially irreversible in nature. That is, they grow and decay. They are also open systems compared to the physical systems which are closed systems. So biological and social systems cannot be subjected to the process of measurements and hence they are not exactly describable in the strict terminology of the physical sciences. In addition, human systems have memory which makes it impossible to do any strictly defined scientific experiment on them. Hence, the systems are studied in a different way by using statistical procedures through which only some trends or patterns are observed. A new discipline has recently emerged, which is called general systems theory. It has been developed to handle such systems. Different sets of rules are there to describe and understand such systems. This development will be very useful to understand the meaning of spirituality also in the modern context. Let me go to the next slide. Now, what are the basic concepts of general system theory? General system theory is used to understand the living systems, biological systems, social systems, and human systems. It is applicable to the open systems unlike the physical theories which are applicable to the closed systems. Here the wholes are not reducible to the parts. Whole can be more than the sum of the parts, like consciousness. Hence there is a strong interdependence among the various parts of a system. There is an organized complexity. The concepts of entropy, order, and information are very important in such cases compared to energy. Now, this is a very big difference. That is, in the biological systems, order or entropy is much more important than energy. Systems resist trends towards disorder by importing energy from the environment and are constantly processing information. Consequences are of more interest. That is, these systems are goal directed systems. The biological systems, social systems, human systems, they have a well defined goal which they want to achieve in their life. They fix up the target and then they try to move to achieve that target. So, hence, in these cases, effect determines the cause and not the other way around, which we talk of cause determining the effect. So in these cases, what happens? We fix up a target, we fix up a goal, and then try to work to achieve this goal or the target. So we organize our causes in such a way that we achieve this particular effect. So any concept of development or even evolution should have order as an important parameter along with knowledge. This is the basic difference and the basic crux of the general system theory. We go on to the next slide. There is another problem which comes in the scientific methods, and that is called the Gödel's incompleteness theorems. Now, the most attractive aspect of scientific knowledge is its mathematical basis. We generally feel that this mathematical representation of various scientific facts make our knowledge more precise and accurate. However, from the two theorems put forward by the great mathematician Kurt Gödel, we find that any mathematical representation of any physical reality limits our knowledge of that reality. Not only this, but the theorems also imply that none of the languages or representation can express the reality of nature with perfection. Complete knowledge must necessarily have its foundation in an inexpressed, unmanifest field of intelligence. There are basically two Gödel's incompleteness theorems, that is first incompleteness theorem and second incompleteness theorem. They are now being extended to all sciences of knowledge which were earlier developed and used for the mathematical laws only. So now these details are available in my papers, so you can refer to them. And just for sake of time and brief, yes, I am not giving the details of these theorems, but they are very fundamental, and they put a stringent limitation on the claim that scientific knowledge is everything and it can describe the reality. So they actually imply need for consciousness also, which can be very meaningful entity. This is an indirect implication of this Gödel's incompleteness theorem. Let me go to the next slide. Now, need to realize that scientific knowledge is only a subset of the total knowledge system. Now, scientific knowledge as defined through physical laws has severe limitations due to mere definition of conservation laws and process of measurements along with statistical errors. Actually, the recent developments in computer science and neurobiology clearly show that knowledge is nothing but information organized in some way, and in turn information is just organization of data in some fashion. It is also realized that human consciousness and even animal consciousness is capable of organizing this data and can generate information and hence knowledge in some way. Therefore, what we call as scientific knowledge is just a subset of this grand concept of knowledge which can exist in the human consciousness. Concept of knowledge as structured in the consciousness is described in various Indian schools of thought. Hence, this needs to be examined in a scientific perspective in view of these observations. Let me go over to the next slide. Now, here when we talk of consciousness, I am particularly trying to cover the concept of consciousness which is mentioned in Jainism. Now, Jainism is an Indian religion that prescribes a path of non-violence towards all living beings and emphasizes spiritual independence and equality between all forms of life. It is similar to what we have in the field of this unified field theory, where all the forces can be reduced to a single field which unifies all the forces. Similarly, all living beings have a common soul, a common consciousness, which is identical among all of them. This is the basic crux of Jainism. Now, the essence of Jainism concerns for the welfare of every living being in the universe. Now, as per Jainism, this world consists of six fundamental elements. They are dharmastika, that is medium of motion. It looks like gravity is probably analogous to this particular term. Second is adharmastika, that is medium of rest. Third is kala, that is time. Fourth is akashastika, that is space. Then fifth is pudgalastika, that is matter. And sixth is soul. Now here the two components, that is adharmastika, that is medium of rest, and soul are very distinct, which are an important attribute of Jainism. They are not there in any other religious thought. And they do not believe in any God. They say that the world moves only on the basis of these six elements. Knowledge is treated as an intrinsic property of soul. Now, coming to the soul, we say that knowledge is treated as an intrinsic property of soul. A pure soul has infinite knowledge, infinite intuition, infinite bliss, and infinite power. But knowledge is treated as the most important property of soul. So this is the concept of soul in Jainism, and it has lot of implications on our present studies, so I am trying to cover them in little detail. Now, as per Jainism, a pure soul has four major characteristics, that is infinite knowledge, infinite intuition, infinite bliss, and infinite power. Now, why, if a pure soul has this infinite knowledge, then why a worldly soul or an ordinary soul has limited knowledge? It is mentioned in the scriptures that it is because of the inhibitions created by the material particles or the matter which comes in the way of recognizing and realizing the infinite knowledge of the pure soul. If you remove these material particles from the pure soul, then over the process, over the time, a process builds up, a spiritual process builds up through which all the material particles can disappear over time, which may take even few births also. And then when all the material disappears from the pure soul, a soul will start showing its true color, its true characteristics. Let me go to the next slide. Now in Jainism, five different type of knowledges are defined. Here at the bottom you can see in the slide, this first is called Mati Gyan, that is knowledge through one's own intuition. A second is called Shrut Gyan, that is knowledge acquired from teachers and scriptures. Then we have this Avdi Gyan, that is knowledge of space and time. Then we have this Man Parya Gyan, that is knowledge of others' heart and brain. So this Avdi Gyan is similar to this telepathy, whereas Man Parya Gyan is similar to clairvoyance. Now in addition to that, another category of knowledge is mentioned in Jainism. It is called Keval Gyan, it is absolute knowledge. So once a person acquires a pure soul, then all type of knowledge disappear and he has only one type of knowledge, and it is called absolute knowledge, that is called Keval Gyan. This is a very new concept for science and it needs to be further explored. Let me go to the next slide. Now, not only this, the concept of knowledge is very extensively described in Jainism, and there are finer categories of various different types of knowledge are being mentioned. For example, knowledge acquired through one's own senses is being categorized in two different ways. As per one categorization, there are 340 subclasses, and as per another categorization, there are 28 classes. Now, knowledge acquired through books and teachers, again they are categorized in two different ways. As per one categorization, there are 18 subclasses, and as per another categorization, there are 20 subclasses. Now, telepathy is again discussed in great detail, and telepathy is having 6 subclasses. Now, this is very interesting indeed, and many details are given, but I can't give it here for the sake of brevity. Similarly, clairvoyance is also having two subcategories. And then finally we have the absolute knowledge, that is of one single type. Now let me mention here that it is mentioned in the scriptures that once you have the absolute knowledge, then all type of knowledges disappear. Let me go to the next slide. Now extrasensory perception. Now let me say something about what I have learned from the Jain scriptures and modern science. Extrasensory perception can exist and need not follow scientific laws. This is the assertion I want to put forward actually in front of this august audience. Jainism extensively talks about extrasensory perception. However, science could not establish. Several experiments have been conducted in last 30-40 years over so many laboratories in the world, and many papers have actually also been published. But there are no strong evidences to prove that extrasensory perception exists and it can follow the laws of science. Now my feeling is that actually ESP is a property of human systems and many biological systems. That is, many animals also have this sense of extrasensory perception. But all these human systems and biological systems are irreversible in nature, and so they follow general system theory. Hence, it is not necessary that they should follow scientific laws of space-time invariance and repeatability. This needs further exploration, but things are very clear that since it is a property of irreversible systems, therefore it cannot be proved as a scientific phenomena which requires repeatability and space-time invariance. Let me go to the next. Now, let me just talk about this example, that what is the meaning of the soul, what is the meaning of consciousness, what is the meaning of infinite knowledge, and so on. Some practical examples I want to show now. Now, here you see the photograph of Swami Vivekananda. He was a Hindu monk, but he is well renowned, and this we are celebrating 150th birth anniversary of him. Now, if you look at some meaning of the term consciousness in the scientific perspective, then we find that it is a property of all biological systems. When our acharyas, rishis and munis talk of realization of a higher state of consciousness which has certain characteristics, then it is worth examining the following examples. This one concerns with extraordinary sharp memory of Swami Vivekananda. As per this, Swamiji had such a sharp memory that he almost remembered 11 volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica which he had just scanned rapidly once. He could virtually recall any line on any page of any of the 11 volumes available at that time to him. And it was tested by one of his disciples, and the disciple was surprised and shocked to know this capability of Swamiji, because when he was going through this Encyclopedia Britannica, he was actually not feeling well and he was suffering from some fever and other diseases. This is an excellent example to show what is the meaning of consciousness in Indian philosophy and Jain philosophy. Let me go to the next slide. Now there is another this uh, this power of consciousness which I should mention here. This is called Shatavdhan, and it is very common and very popular among Jainism, and particularly the highly developed Jain monks. Now, Shatavdhan here is a Sanskrit word. Shat means 100 and Avdhan means ability to receive, retain and or execute 100 activities acted through the eyes or ear during one period of attention and carried from the conscious to the subconscious. One who reaches the stage of Shatavdhan is called Shatavdhani. This unbelievable power has been attained by a handful of people over the human history, because it occurs after a very high stage of spiritual development. According to the modern scientific belief, a common man can hear and remember serially 3 or 4 statements, events at a time. This is based on the conscious mind. Anyone with exceptional intellect can extend this number from 3, 4 to 10 to 11. But here in this photograph you see, his name is Srimad Rajchandji. He was teacher of Mahatma Gandhi, who has learned the concept of non-violence from Sri Rajchandji. So he is well known, he was well known, the Shatabdi, and he had given practical demonstration also many times. Now in the recent time we have another example, and I am very happy to tell you that I have seen this monk and his demonstration not just once but 2 times, one in Ahmedabad and another in Mumbai. And in this particular example, uh, he was asked some 100 questions, 100 or some quotations, some mathematical puzzles, whose details are given in the next slide. Now, this monk is just 19-year-old only. That is, he was 19 years old in 2009. Now he is around 24 years old. And now I have seen this demonstration in Mumbai also. Here in this case, it shows the type of questions which were asked to him, the type of I would say these queries which were made to him, the type of mathematical puzzles which were put forward before him, and he listened to them for about 3.5 hours, and without reacting to any of them. And after 3.5 hours, he just recited, he just spoke out about all these questions in the same sequence, and then he answered all the questions also. And it is an absolutely wonderful experience which I had in Ahmedabad, and second time just last year only I had this similar experience in Mumbai, where not just 100 but he handled 200 questions and he has answered almost all of them. Several excellent examples were there which are beyond our mind actually. It is just not possible to imagine those things. Now, what is that thing? What is the state of this consciousness which these people have? This is a big challenge to science. It needs to be examined in detail. Let me go to the next slide. Now, here I give you a table for measurement of length developed by Jains. Now, here you see that this length is measured. There are 20 steps involved in this table, and in the first 12 steps you can see an octal system is there, so a figure of 8 is coming again and again here, and then we have some other this multiple number. Now many of the objects are not known actually now today, but this table shows that if we look at the 12th step, then the angle appears on the right hand side. Now this one angle is nothing but this finger width. Now if we take the finger width as 2 centimeter and do some back calculation, we find that the size of Avsanna Sanna Skand is around 2.9 into 10 to the power minus 11 centimeter. So angle width of finger is equal to 2 centimeter, which is equal to 8 to the power 12 Avsanna Sanna Skandas. So size of 1 Avsanna Sanna Skandas is equal to 2 into 10, 2 into 8 to the power minus 12 centimeter is equal to 2.9 into 10 to the power minus 11 centimeter. Now size of the atom is around 10 to the power minus 8 centimeter, and size of a nucleus is equal to 10 to the power minus 13 centimeter. So size of an atom and size of nuclei if we take, then this estimate of the smallest particle of matter about 2000 years ago shows very clearly show that there is a strong evidence that this Jain acharyas or Jain monks might have developed different type of knowledge system through which they could perceive even the microscopic particles of matter. Not only just perceiving, but they could also estimate the size of those particles, and those sizes are resembling the the current sizes of atoms and nuclei. So this means that there could exist new avenues of knowledge, new frontiers of knowledge which are not yet known to us. So implications of these observations: there exist extraordinary controls in the human systems which can be developed through spiritual practices. These controls are such that one can control various physiological processes of one's body in general and that of brain and mind in particular. Such examples imply existence of extraordinary state of human mind or consciousness which are not yet properly explored by the scientific community. These states involve extraordinary order in the brain mind of these monks. This order appears to involve large signal to noise ratio in the brain. Signal to noise ratio is a term used in communication technology. It means that what is the ratio of signal to noise, and if the ratio is large means noise is less and signal is very powerful. So in case of these monks, it appears that the signal to noise ratio is very large. Now, such practices which are very common in India appears to involve new frontiers of knowledge and evolution. Let me go to the next. Now some examples of orderliness and order in nature. Now when I am saying that the brain and mind of these monks is in a highly ordered state, now what is the meaning of this order, which is so important in the case of gender system theory also? Let me slightly deviate from the main topic and just give examples of order. Now we have climatological order through precise movement of earth around sun and moon around the earth and proper mix of various gases in atmosphere with a narrow temperature range, etc. We have there are up to 6 seasons on various parts of the earth which occur in a periodic way. This is a kind of order. Agriculture order is there in the agriculture order in the terminology of crop cycles, water cycles, solar cycles, soil cycles and other parameters. Various cyclic processes in biological systems and human systems, that is self-organized structure in the brain and our body. Now there is periodic movements in astronomy and atomic sciences. So order in the life supporting system. So the order is a very general term. It is a property of general system theory also. So there is a need to review this concept of order in a very broad perspective, and how this order is related with the order developed in the brain needs to be further explored and studied. Now I come to the Darwin principle of evolution, which needs critical review. Now, at this juncture, it is also necessary to understand the Darwin principle of evolution and impact of its education on the society and the environment, because it also concerns with consciousness, life, and so on. Now, here assumption is made that all life emerged from slow evolution from a single ancestor. The basic idea of the hypothesis is that due to limitation on resources, various species of living world struggle for survival. Those which have slightly superior functionality will survive, and others which do not have these additional functionalities will be eliminated, and the whole process is very slow. This is described in short by a saying, the survival of the fittest. With the new developments in genetics, the natural selection is considered during mutation, and these genes are selected, and those genes are selected which are superior in functionalities. There are no goals, but there are no goals when we talk of Darwin principle of evolution. There are no goals or targets for a species. They only look at nearby future and attempt to survive. Goldsmith, a British ecologist who is no longer now with us, feels that it is due to too much emphasis of the education of the Darwin principle of evolution that so much damage has been done to the environment and the society. Now, how can we compare the Darwin's principle of evolution with the Jain principle of live and let live, which underlies a fundamental identity among all living beings, that is, a common soul present among all the living beings? So, on the left side, I give the concept of survival of fittest. It should be compared with live and let live. There are different issues. So, survival of fittest is based on physical reality, whereas principle of live and let live is based on spiritual reality. Survival of fittest emphasizes on differences in species, whereas live and let live emphasize on underlying identity. Survival of fittest results into unwanted competition, whereas live and let live results into cooperation. Survival of fittest actually resulted into this a society which has been badly damaged, whereas due to the principle of live and let live, society gets enlightenment. In the case of survival of fittest or this Darwin principle of evolution, there is no goal. Here, in the case of live and let live, there is a definite goal, that is to get a pure soul or a concept of mox. Now, these are very compatible with the general system theory also. Now, many species are dying because of too much emphasis on the Darwin principle of education, Darwin principle of evolution. Whereas in the case of this live and let live, many species can be saved and they can be protected, and there are several stories in Jain scripture which says that many kings have tried to save the life of inferior species by giving even their lives. Now, in the case of survival of fittest, resources are exploited, whereas in the second principle of live and let live, resources are conserved. So, these are two different way of looking at the reality, and they need to explore these ideas in the light of the general system theory also. Now, in the case of, now when we talk of Darwin's principle of evolution, Jains also talk of a principle of evolution where they define 14 stages of consciousness, and if we go into the details, we find that there is a state of complete chaos in the first state, and as it actually goes up and up and up through the 14 stages, it becomes completely free from material particles, and the soul becomes pure, and then it starts showing its intrinsic characteristics. Now, this process of evolution may take several births also, and there are several interesting stories which are available in literature. Now, let me go to the next slide. Now, what it means actually, the whole thing implies that spiritual processes results into decrease in rate of entropy production as well as resource consumption. Now, if we compare the Darwin principle of evolution and the Jain principle, and if we look at the ethics followed by Jain monks, we find that there is a state of orderliness, and the orderliness increases as the spiritual processes goes up and up and up and becomes more and more stringent, more and more strong rules are followed, the human consciousness develop, and it try to becomes a pure soul, that is a soul without any matter. And there are examples. Lord Mahavir was, for example, he acquired this state of pure soul about 2500 years ago in India. Now let me go to the next slide. Now here in this conference it will be interesting that we are because we are talking of syntropy, entropy and concept of soul or consciousness. So I have a simple hypothesis to suggest. I mean it should be explored further. This is an idea. As per Jainism, with increase in purity of soul, one can look both in past, present as well as future. A person having purest form of soul, that is without any matter, can see infinitely in past, full present and infinitely in future. The intermediate situation depends on quantity of matter attached with the soul. Now, what it means is that a person having pure soul can see the past, the infinite past. He can also see the infinite future. Now, this situation we have as an example that I mean a pure soul perceives total reality, that is reality both in positive and negative side of time. This need to be explored further, but this seems to be a good analogy which is which has struck me, so I thought I will present it before. We go to the next slide. Now again we talk of order and consciousness and those things and Jain concept of consciousness. I have found that I have feeling that that concept of consciousness is very close to the implicate order of quantum mechanics. And this implicate order of quantum mechanics, as you see, is described here. It is an implicate order, and explicate order Bohm's talk about. Explicate order is the ordinary physical reality which is described through particles and their interaction, whereas implicate order, he says that it is a much bigger reality and is a highly ordered state. So this explicate order, which is an ordinary physical order, is just I mean part of it. It is just a representation of what we observe. So this seems to be very close to what Jains are talking about. We go to the next soul. Now, can pure soul be an entity for which causality is neither obeyed nor violated? This is another actually concept I put forward about 30 years ago, and it was very much appreciated by Professor B.D. Josephson. Here the concept is that can a pure soul be an entity for which causality is neither obeyed nor violated? We have examples where causality is obeyed in physical, say this classical physics and so on, but we have example in the causality is violated. For example, effect determines the cause. So this is another way. And similarly in quantum mechanics we have violation of causality, I mean due to random forces or random causes which are beyond our control. So we have an entity for which causality is neither obeyed nor violated. So that could be a property of a pure soul. It again needs to be explored further. So I mean I just want to conclude now that by these 4-5 things. Concept of scientific methodology developed to study closed isolated systems is not adequate to study human systems and their interaction with the environment in a perfect way. For open and dynamic systems, biological and human systems, general system theory should be explored for better understanding of them. Concept of knowledge is very broad, and scientific knowledge is only a subset of knowledge structured in the consciousness. In the recent year, too much importance has been given to the scientific knowledge, and these domains, other areas of knowledge have been given less importance. There is a need to have a critical review of this situation, and we should give equal importance to other sources of knowledge also, including ESP. Similarly, order and knowledge. Now this is the basic idea that order and knowledge could be primary parameters in defining any concept of development and evolution, because this is in consistency with the general system theory. Now actually because of this, Darwin's principle of evolution, that is survival of fittest, needs to be examined in light of general system theory and compared with rules like live and let live, which may provide better options, better solutions to the present crisis. Lastly, spiritual processes appears to be accompanied by an increase in order, signal to noise ratio also in the brain, and a decrease in entropy. It is also accompanied by reduction in consumption of resources at all levels. So when we talk of spiritual development, there is a need to give more and more importance to this process, spiritual processes, and what they results into, and what type of this direction of evolution, I mean, it can provide. So, I mean, there can be several ways and, in which we can have new frontiers of knowledge and new frontiers of evolution, which should be explored with an open mind. Actually, without getting biased to the standard and the rigid rules of physical sciences. So, thanks to all great souls gathered over here. Thank you very much.